Colleges are woke. You know it, I know it. Everything from the sports fields to the classrooms, DEI programs are there. And you know what? We're paying for it. It can be a tough pill to swallow, but some sweet tea should help, so let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ari Guajardo. Today, we're going to be talking about all things DEI in college campuses, and that's from the classroom all the way to the volleyball court. So let's get started. Today, my guest was actually a college athlete herself doing volleyball. She's now a policy analyst for the Education Initiative at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. She got her master's from Stanford University, and she got her undergraduate at UC Berkeley. So needless to say, she is an expert on DEI. So Kate Bierly?
Bierly.
I'm so sorry. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is just how close we are. I didn't even need to learn your last name first. So you went to, I think arguably, at least for Berkeley, known as the woke campus.
It sure is.
Of crazy campuses in America. How did you end up here in Texas and working on conservative initiatives?
Well, I actually grew up in quite a conservative household in Southern Orange County, and my parents, luckily I was raised by a two-parent household and had some good values to kind of lean back on, but going to some kind of different universities than what I was used to growing up, it honestly made my values stronger and really developed a passion to want to get into something where people thought similar to me. So that kind of led me to Texas, and then kind of found Texas Public Policy Foundation, and thankful I'm here.
How have you felt, because you've spent basically most of your life, if not all of your life, really in California. What was that transition like? And has Texas been any better than California?
It feels like heaven, to say the least. No, it's amazing. And I'm hoping I can get my family over here too. But yeah, no, it's definitely nice to be around people who think similar to you. So I love it here.
That's awesome. And this is your first podcast appearance, right? Speaking about this?
It is my first podcast appearance.
I think that means that everyone should give this episode some extra love, show some support in the comments for Kate.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you're listening this far, put a way to go, Kate, in there just for us. Make sure you subscribe, follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening to right now. So let's start out with something else, not just the education component, but what you did on the volleyball court. But you were doing sand volleyball, right?
I was doing sand volleyball, correct.
So now that you're seeing a story come out, right now we're filming this in mid-October. It might be later when this gets released. But there's a story about a guy at San Jose University.
San Jose State,
or San Jose State, excuse me, who is playing against women's volleyball teams, or at least on the team, and teams are refusing to play him. What is happening there?
Yeah, so unfortunately, this is not the only case of a man playing in women's sports, but since it is so close to where I went to school, the story is kind of blowing up. There's a man who goes by Blair Fleming, and he plays on the women's indoor team at San Jose State. And not only does this make other people feel slightly uncomfortable, his own teammates are coming out against this issue. One of them being Brooke Slessor. And so there's a lawsuit going on, and they're trying to figure out, what do you do when you have a man who is biologically different, has more testosterone, more bone density? It's a complete disadvantage, especially to women who've worked their entire lives to have court time and to compete, and it's such an honor to compete, and you're put at such a disadvantage when you've got a man on the court. So it's the stories are coming out in the news about it. It's definitely a big story.
And Brooke, the teammate who she came onto the team, I think her junior year, and didn't actually know until later into the into being there and being on campus that there was a man who was on her team. And so that's why she started speaking out. She even went on Megyn Kelly's podcast to did a little interview and talked about it. And one of the things that stood out to me is that she was advised by I think it was the coaches and the people on the team to be able to get closer to the team, that she should go and live with some of the girls because they had an open spot. And so it's 4 of them living together, one of them being Blair.
Yes.
And she had no idea. And so I think that's just completely unfair and crazy as well, that they were hiding that fact. And on multiple trips, whenever they were traveling, she kept noticing usually they're rotating who's together, but I guess I keep ending up with Blair. So, and part of the reason was apparently they asked Blair who he would be comfortable with being in a room with and didn't even think about asking these girls.
Yeah, there were no takers.
Yeah, well, they just asked him and just started assigning.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that was really, it kind of, I think, just went even further across the board than what we've seen with just like being on the field with someone, but actually like having to share a room with someone in that position and not being told about that ahead of time.
Absolutely.
So you do travel stuff like that all the time, right?
Absolutely. And you live with your assigned roommate for days, sometimes even a week at a time. And you're spending a lot of time with them in environments that you typically wouldn't when you're back at school. So it's definitely an interesting situation to navigate.
So I think it's 5 schools now who have where the teams have said that they're not going to be playing against them. And
Yes.
is it Nevada that's
correct?
Okay.
That's the most recent one.
Right. And it came from the girls themselves, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the girls came out and kind of united together to say, we don't want to do this anymore. So we'll see where that trajectory kind of leads as the season goes on and approaches So I don't know where it'll go, but we'll see what happens and to see if more girls take a stance against it.
Right. I did really find it interesting, though, how the university came out and was saying that that they were wanting the girls to continue to play, and it's the girls on the team who are standing up and saying no.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of really pushed farther than it was a few years ago, where I think for the first time girls were put in an awkward position they never expected to happen. It's like specifically with swimming when we think of, what was it, Leah Thomas, right?
Yeah.
And Riley Gaines has continued to speak out about that. But this is happening now preemptively because we've seen how much how you can get injured, and in addition to it just not being fair, it's actually dangerous for the girls who are on these kinds of sports teams.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and an example of that didn't happen too long ago. This Blair, she had hit another opponent in the face, and so it was just, I don't know, it becomes a safety concern too, because their swing is a lot more powerful than a biological female's swing.
Yeah. Have you ever like just played just I guess scrimmage games against guys, or just played back and forth with them?
Yes.
How much does it change?
It changes so much. So I grew up playing co-ed beach volleyball, and it was scary when a guy is up at the net. Granted, it's a higher net. The difference between a man's net and a woman's net, there is some, I don't even know what it is, maybe around a foot or so. But when a man is on a female's net, it is a completely different story. Not only does their vertical look way higher in comparison, but it's definitely a huge advantage that you do not want to be on the other side of the net when a dude is swinging at you.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting how this is all happening now. And I think that there's still conservatives who feel caught off guard by the fact that this is happening at all. But I don't know why we're so surprised.
Yeah.
DEI programs, and it wasn't called DEI before, but these are the kinds of things that have been in our institutions that the left has been working for decades.
Yeah.
And there have been a few people on the fringes of the right who've been calling it out, but it's not until now when we're seeing the effects of it where conservatives are having to be like, wait a second. And now we're playing defense instead of playing offense.
Absolutely, yeah.
So speaking about that, a lot of this, like I'm saying, that the philosophy of it that led to where we are now, to where people are defending this and trying to protect the guy trying to play in a women's sports, I think a lot of that comes from our university system, which is why there have been initiatives in Texas to try to figure out how do we handle DEI in Texas. So last session, and to give some clarity, session in Texas meets every other year. And last session, there were a lot of there was Senate Bill 17 that was passed. And I think a lot of people understood that as saying like DEI is no longer going to be in colleges. What's actually going on with that?
Yeah, so it actually does not mean that DEI is no longer around in colleges. It's actually quite the opposite. It's very heavily prevalent in colleges. All Senate Bill 17 did was ban the training, DEI training for faculty in higher ed institutions. And this also removed all DEI offices from higher institutions. So that actually doesn't touch any classroom content. So professors and faculty, they have all the freedom that they want to teach any DEI infused curriculum that they please inside the four walls of the classroom.
So because of that, you and Sherry Sylvester, who's also been on the show, have been doing a little bit of a research project to look into how prevalent that is in Texas.
Yes, we have.
Okay, so next year I actually printed out the research that you've been doing.
Yes.
Yeah, will you go through and kind of just tell us about some of the classes that are on the books? Let's start with UT Austin, I guess.
Yes. University of Texas at Austin, there's actually quite a few, and this isn't even this is barely scratching the surface of how many DEI infused courses there are. The ones that are here just particularly explicitly say something along the lines of diversity, equity, inclusion, or power, privilege, all of that. So just a few is dialogue across difference, identity, power, and privilege, diversity, equity, inclusion, capstone, diverse communities and care, diversity and equity, issues in education. The list goes on. More social justice classes.
Yeah. The one that kind of stood out to me was equity and diversity issues in education, and specifically on the description, it says that issues in PK through 12 and higher education, but the fact that they really are talking about how do we infuse this in those lower level classes
Absolutely.
is a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to emphasize the fact that that's the list that you guys are compiling with these classes. And it's not just UT, it's like state schools across Texas.
Correct.
Those are just the ones that are explicitly saying those exact words in their title or in the course description.
Exactly.
But there's so many
There's more.
So I actually wrote down a couple of them. These are just the ones from the upper division film media studies classes. And the reason whenever we were going through this, I'm like, there's way more. And I know because I saw all of those on my course catalog and I had options to take them. So one of them is called Race, Class, Gender in American TV. And the professor for that one I actually had for a different class, very at the time we didn't call it DEI, but very kind of that direction.
Maybe.
Yeah. And then another one is Queer Media Studies. This one, I hate the title of this, but Chicana/O Cinema. So for multiple reasons. Oh, and the other weird thing with these, they always, now instead of like putting Hispanic, whatever, they always have to put, like in the past you put Latino / if that's the way that you're calling it. But now they're switching it to where it's always the A first.
Yes.
Just weird things. But I wanted to read the course description for that one because it says, themes of particular interest include the construction of racial, ethnic, national, and individual identity, the politics of representation, film as a tool for social change, the commodification of Latinidad, gender inequality in the Chicano movement, film industry, and the writing of film history and issues of authorship and creative control. The weird thing is there's so many like different pieces of this where I'm like, these are just all DEI flag names. So like, and even one of the titles, this is just to highlight how woke things have gotten. So like Latinidad is kind of the, I guess, more Latinized way of, where it's kind of a replacement for Latinx because that's not used in Spanish. So there have been a couple of different words proposed to substitute it. Latinidad, which kind of just refers to like Latin, like, I guess Latino ethnicity, and is used in that way. But I was reading, whenever I was looking this up yesterday, there was like a commentary from someone in California about how that word is like anti-Black. If you're like promoting all that to say, you cannot be
you can't
virtuous enough in that sphere. And then the last one I wanted to tell you about, there's a class called Gender and Media Culture. And so this professor has a lot of classes that all end with this one line where it says that the course insists on an intersectional approach that examines gender in conjunction with race, class, sexuality, nation, and generation. So all of them are very explicit as you have to have that kind of approach in order to even be going through the course material.
Yeah.
So we see UT, like obviously I could just go through that list. We have film programs, a lot of liberal arts stuff. And people think they know it's kind of known as the most liberal college in Texas, I would say. But the other colleges that you think are conservative also have some classes. So do you want to go through some of the other schools that might surprise you?
Yes. So we looked at 7 of the flagship colleges in Texas, and some of the other ones that had quite a bit of DEI content was Texas A&M, Texas State, Texas Tech, University of North Texas, University of Houston, and then Texas Women's University had quite a bit. So universities all over are having these, some people put it as the unholy trinity of race, gender, and sex. So
the two that surprised me though are especially like Tech and A&M.
Absolutely.
Because Texas Tech, like think about the fact that Lubbock is a city that literally became a sanctuary city from abortion.
Yes.
Like that's the kind of like cultural conservatism that exists there.
Totally.
Like, and what are some of the more surprising classes from there?
Let's see. We got diversity, equity, and inclusion in youth development organizations, diversity and social justice in higher education, diversity and inclusion in organizations, managing workplace diversity, communication in a diverse world.
That was from Texas Tech?
No, that was from A&M.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's a lot from A&M. Like, I think people don't think about that, like this another conservative area known as like the more conservative school.
Absolutely.
But this is all of higher education.
Totally. Yeah. And the list goes on.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think considering that there's that many classes that are so explicit about it still, we can't be surprised that there's going to be men's on women's sports teams when that's the kind of philosophy that we're facilitating.
Yep. We've abandoned what higher education was intended to do.
And more people have higher education now. So it's just more people having gone through that same system.
Absolutely.
Again, I'm glad I went to higher education, but
me as well.
I'm glad that we came out of it unscathed, less scathed. I don't know. So because he went to Berkeley and Stanford, on the show, I've had a chance to talk about a couple of different like weird, I guess, woke moments on campus that I encountered. But my guess is that Berkeley kind of went even farther than that. So what are some of your crazy
absolutely. I think it was the first time that I really realized that people thought so differently than me there. And so specifically at Berkeley was my first introduction to intersectionality.
Because that's what it used to be called then, right?
That's what it used to be called, yeah. And so I had to write so many papers in the education department about intersectionality, and I didn't realize that, okay, I was an oppressor because of the color of my skin, and writing.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm in a safe space right now. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And so this idea of an oppressor and the oppressed in these different people groups who are more likely to be more oppressed than others. Another massive thing that I wasn't used to was a positionality statement. And I had to write a decent amount of them at Stanford.
Wait, what is a positionality statement?
A positionality statement. I'm glad you asked. It's a statement that you make acknowledging your positionality and the power you hold in certain circles that you are in. So for example, I went through their teacher education program, and as a white woman, what are the powers that I hold going into a classroom of people who look a little bit different than I do. And so just acknowledging where I come from and what power my background holds. And so that was a foreign idea to me. I had no idea things like that really did exist. And yeah, that kind of opened my eyes.
So when would you be making a positionality statement, or how did that work?
Before taking a class. So we had a cohort. Meanwhile, they would pride themselves in being like the most diverse cohort yet, which is kind of baloney because there was zero diversity of thought. And but before each class, we would have to write a diversity or a positionality statement. So before you step into the space, you would acknowledge, here's where I come from, here's where other people are. I'm going to take space and make space based off of where I am on the social hierarchy. I really don't know.
I hate that terminology that's being used right now of like, you have to understand the space that you occupy, and then other people can't occupy that space.
Yes. And the abolitionist mindset that if you are not actively abolishing what these kind of invisible standards are, then like you are a racist. Like you have to actively undo the racism that our society has created. So yeah, that was new for me.
So did everyone have to make these positionality statements?
Everyone did, yeah.
And are you, like, let's say you're the oppressed class, is your positionality statement of like, I'm coming at this being like,
I'm a white woman, yeah.
So like for the other people, would it, like, what would the most intense one be like, I am a like queer, black, like transgender woman, or what?
I guess, but in my opinion, the most oppressed would be, I would be a white male, because everyone thinks that I'm the most like harmful guy in society.
And they want you to get out of their space that they feel entitled to.
You can't take that much space because, So,
but then why would, if that's the philosophy of these schools, then why are they accepting white people in them? I just don't understand, like, if you're going to have that ideology, then again, maybe they are pushing that direction. So
exactly. It turns out it's actually more divisive than inclusive. So
yeah, we did not have positionality statements. Thank God. We did have to use our preferred pronouns whenever we were introducing ourselves, which, by the way, if anyone's in that position, my recommendation is just skip over it. They usually won't ask.
Yeah.
If they do ask, I just went, oh, I'm a girl.
Yeah. Or you can call me Kate. Yeah.
Yeah. But that one's new. I hadn't heard about that before.
Yeah.
The like syllabi would come with things like the like the statement of like, we recognize that this is Native American land that we're on.
Yes, a land
we're all
acknowledgement.
together on Turtle Island.
Yeah. Yep, we had our fair share of those as well.
Yeah, but that was something that you just read in the syllabi. This professor might say, you flip it over. We did not have to make a positionality statement of me acknowledging
Yeah,
my
you're off
privilege.
the hook.
I mean, I guess you could say, like, I acknowledge that if I come from a household with 2 parents, I'm, like, extraordinarily blessed and set ahead.
Absolutely,
But I
yeah.
don't think being a Hispanic or woman changes a lot of those things
I
for me
agree.
anymore.
I totally agree.
So we talked about the Senate Bill 17, what that did, which is just now teachers are not required to have to go through that kind of training.
Correct.
They can still do it in class. So what are other steps that might be taken looking forward to next legislative session?
Yeah. So something that is trying to attack DEI, maybe from a different angle, is the General Education Act. And what this does is kind of reforming the requirements that are needed in the general education school. And so it kind of restores the idea of Western thought and getting people to know about our government and making those who graduate from higher education institutions have a solid foundation on what is America? Why is it awesome? And
well, let's back up because it's called the General Education Act.
Correct.
Okay. So what does general education mean? Like, what classes does that consist of usually?
Yeah. So typically in a university, you'll have a general education requirements, but this General Education Act would,
and that would normally be things like math, science,
history.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
A few core classes. And specifically within the history of current general education, instead of taking a survey course, which would typically be like for history, it would be from the founding of our nation to Civil War, and then from Civil War to present day. Instead of taking that, you could take a special topics course in substitute to satisfy that requirement, which would be gay Black history or something super niche, which doesn't equip you. You can take it, but it doesn't give you the solid foundation of what is the hardy history that we want our university students to know.
So it's what the problem with it is that those classes are replacing the classes that normally students, you'd want them to have to be well-rounded if they're being educated in Texas.
Exactly. And you're not taking anything out. You're just requiring what should be required to take. And this specifically,
so if students did want to take their like Black queer cinema class,
absolutely,
they still could.
They can take it, and they have the freedom to take it, which is the awesome thing about it. But you're not required to take Black gay cinema to satisfy a core general education requirement. So it's it'll be interesting to see where that goes and which universities want to have their own school of general education with a dean of that school. So we'll see how that shakes out. And kind of looking at this from a 30,000 foot view, I guess the past 2 sessions in 2021 and 2023, it's been kind of getting rid of DEI measures and slowly chipping away at this. And as we approach this session coming up, it's what can we build, what foundations can we build to really ensure that we're equipping our higher education students the way that they should be.
That's awesome. But it's really interesting that even if that happens, there still are going to be classes that students might be going through where they might, like if they're conservatives especially, they might be put in an awkward position to like you said, have to put together positionality statements. Or if you're on a sports team in college, we're still having situations like this where you might be facing like a situation where you have to figure out like is like, can I continue to pursue this without having my values conflict with what's happening?
Yeah.
So you were in volleyball, right? Sam volleyball. If the situation like that's happening at San Jose State happened to you, how would you have handled that, or how would you recommend other people handle it?
That's a great question. See, I think that change only is going to happen when we have courageous girls to stand up. So I applaud those women on the Nevada team and even Blair's teammates who are speaking up. So looking back, if I was in that similar position, I would like to think that I would have the courage to stand up. Part of me is like, gosh, I really wish I could play against him and beat him and have the satisfaction of it. But also I think it would help the future generations of women to see strong women like Riley Gaines stand up and say, no, like this isn't right. So Yeah, that's probably what I hope I would do if I was in that position.
Well, let's talk about the classroom. Now that you're able to look back on your experience, do you wish that there was any other way that you had pushed back? Or are there small ways that you could continue to live out your values if you're in that kind of collegiate system?
Yeah, looking back, I think I definitely would have, there's not much I think I would have changed. I think since it was all so new to me, I wanted to get good grades. I wanted to graduate. I wanted to make my parents proud and get a good job. And so I don't think I gave as much resistance to those. Ideologies as much as I hoped I would. So, for example, on those positionality statements, I'm sure I made my professors really proud on some of the positionality statements that I wrote. But yeah, looking back, I think I would have. I hope I had more courage to really say no. Actually, I don't think I believe in this, especially when, like I said earlier, there is no diversity of thought. So I felt like I was on my own trying to stand up by myself when everyone else, despite them looking different, they all thought the same. And so it would be an uphill battle there.
Yeah, the way that I would recommend, at least in small part, because I think courage is something that you have to practice to be able to be good at it and to know
Mhm.
when you're equipped to be able to stand up to something even bigger. So,
Yeah.
like the smaller things, like for pronouns and stuff, sometimes it was
Mhm.
either introducing yourself, where I would just skip over that section,
Yeah.
or sometimes where I felt a little bit more nervous about it is like on assignments or like at the beginning of class, if you had to like give something to a professor that had stuff about you,
Yeah.
there's a part you had to fill out that was required for like we're asked like what your pronouns were. So
Yeah.
again, like even just making that choice of leaving it blank there,
Yeah.
then it's telling them like, oh, I just didn't forget to do it, and I didn't just accidentally forget. I'm
Yes.
consciously saying no.
Choosing. Yeah.
So I think that that's a small way that I
Mhm.
would recommend if you're trying to build courage to be able to stand up for your values. That would be one small thing. That would be
Mhm.
at least a step closer to it. And then the other thing that I was just thinking about is how I would handle certain classes. Like I did a lot of religious studies classes,
Mm.
um, and certain times, for if you're Christian, you might not necessarily align with religious studies professors because it's not theology. Religious studies is really the study of how society impacts religion and how it impacts society. So it's almost more of a
Mhm.
sociological
Yeah.
approach to examining it. But one thing that I think helped me go through it is the way that I would word my essays is this professor at this university asserts this. So it was a way of like
Mm.
saying like even if it asked a statement like because there's a lot of it's writing portions
Yeah.
on like the history of something, I wouldn't say like this is how it is or here's what I think. It would be like, well, this person argues this. This other
Yeah.
one might make an argument about this. So just staying factual was
Yeah.
my little way to sneak around it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Definitely good advice.
Any other last words that you would give to someone who is either entering college or already in college and trying to stand up and be courageous?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think people are always going to disagree with you. People will always have an opinion. I think something that helped me is like my faith. And I think that kind of gave me more of a tunnel vision to focus on what's actually important and kind of ignore all the noisiness outside of me. So I think just stand up for what you're convicted in. Or what your convictions are. And yeah, you're always gonna have people who have comments about every little thing. So I guess just shake the dust off and just keep on going.
That's awesome. And is there any way that people can keep up with the research that you're doing?
Yes. Actually I just came out or
Not
am
you didn't just come
currently.
out.
Yeah. I am
The
currently
DEI got to you.
yeah, it was too fast. I am currently coming out with a paper on foreign funding into these universities that I looked into with the DEI classes and foreign funding, particularly from hostile nations like China and Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. And so all those will be published on Texas Policy, our website.
Yeah,
So
you can
yeah.
go to texaspolicy.com to see hers and other articles that we've continued to do like this. And hopefully you'll find ways to be able to stand up to DEI and be looking out. We might end up having a DEI phone number. We're still not sure about that, but if we have it, definitely look into it and use it if your classes have that. Thank you so much, Kate, for being able to come on the show, talk about all these
Mhm.
things.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully, we'll see you again for the next time something controversial like this happens.
Yes.
For everyone else, continue to be bold, and we'll see you next time on Sweet Tea.